The purchased Darren Knox had seen enough ugliness in his 38 years to know when to look away. The cargo manifest glowing on his wrist display needed his attention more than whatever fresh horror the Varon station flesh markets were peddling today. But something made him stop a shimmer of silver hair through the grimy transparisteel of vendor booth 47. The creature inside was no larger than a human child, curled against the back wall of her enclosure. Her skin held an ethereal pale blue tint, and when she looked up, her eyes blazed like twin stars. The placard read exactly what he'd expected: another exotic companion for wealthy collectors who got their thrills from owning sentient beings. "She doesn't eat much," wheezed Gorthic, the three-eyed Zalonian merchant, sensing potential profit. "Very quiet, very obedient, perfect for please." The word cut through the station's ambient noise like a blade. The girl had pressed herself. Against the transparisteel, her luminous eyes locked on Darren's. "Please ... take me home." Darren's blood turned to ice. Nyari were supposed to be non-verbal. Beautiful, graceful, intelligent enough to follow basic commands, but incapable of true language. That was what made them safe to own exotic pets that couldn't beg for freedom. "Did she just..." Darren started. "Mimicry," Gorthic said quickly. But his middle eye twitched nervously. She heard other humans talking. Parrot sounds, you know. No real understanding. The girl's fingers traced symbols on the cage floor. Not random scratches, but letters. Human letters spelling out help. How much? Darren heard himself ask ... double quotes. "Ah, you have good eye. She is premium specimen, very rare coloring. How much?" 20 minutes later, Darren was walking through the station's lower decks with a collar and leash, set in one hand and a transfer of ownership certificate in the other. The girl Zara, according to her registration, walked silently beside him, her bare feet making no sound on metal grating. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly as they approached his ship's docking bay. "But I need you to understand there are cameras everywhere, security checkpoints. Until we're off this station, you're my ... property." She nodded once, and the intelligence in that gesture made his stomach turn. His ship, the Wandering Star, was a converted military transport, cramped, but reliable. As the airlock sealed behind them, Darren expected her to speak again, to demand explanations or beg for her freedom. Instead, she collapsed when she hit the deck plating, unconscious. He saw the neural inhibitor chip embedded at the base of her skull, still active, still suppressing something. Someone had wanted to make very sure she stayed quiet, but inhibitors weren't perfect. Sometimes they failed, sometimes they broke. The awakening Zara came to in the ship's small medical bay, restrained, to an examination table with soft polymer bonds. Darren sat across from her, a steaming cup of synthetic coffee in his hands, and worry lines etched deep around his gray eyes. "The neural inhibitor almost killed you," he said without preamble. "It's overloading. I can remove it, but I need to know what I'm dealing with first." She tested the restraints, not roughly, just checking their strength. "You could have left me unconscious, sold me to another buyer. Could have." He sipped his coffee. "Didn't. Why?" Darren was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "My daughter would have been about your age. Would have been if the hegemony hadn't glassed Kepler 442b during the border wars." Understanding flickered in her luminous eyes. "You lost someone." "Everyone." The words came out flat, emotionless. "Whole colony. 3 million people, including my family." He set down his cup. "So when I see someone in a cage who shouldn't be there, I get motivated." Zara tilted her head, and for a moment she looked alien, not human-like at all, but something far older and more dangerous. "The inhibitor isn't just suppressing my speech, Darren Knox. It's suppressing my memories, my abilities. Everything that makes me what I am. Which is? Before she could answer, proximity alarms screamed through the ship. Darren's display lit up with incoming signals. 3 fast attack vessels, military grade, closing on their position with predatory intent. They found us already, he muttered, releasing Zara's restraints and tossing her a spare jumpsuit. Get dressed. This is about to get ugly. She pulled on the clothing with fluid grace. They're not after you, Captain. They're after me. Who's they? The lead ship opened communications before she could answer. The holographic image that materialized showed a woman in crimson military dress, her face scarred by old burns and her expression coldly furious. Captain Knox, the woman said, her voice carrying the crisp accent of core world nobility. I am Colonel Vera Thorne of the Imperial Reclamation Corps. You have stolen property belonging to the hegemony. Return the specimen immediately, and you will be permitted to leave. Darren glanced at Zara, who had gone very still. And if I refuse, then you die with her. The transmission cut off. Warning lights bathed the medical bay in red as the attacking ships powered weapons. Imperial Reclamation Corps, Zara whispered, and her voice carried notes of ancient terror. They're the ones who did this to me. Did what? She looked up at him, and for just a moment, the neural inhibitor flickered. In that instant, Darren saw something impossible, not a girl at all, but something vast and powerful wearing a girl's shape. Something that could burn stars if it chose to. They tried to turn me into a weapon, she said. But first, they had to make me forget that I was already one. The Hunt the Wandering Star shuddered under enemy fire as Darren threw the ship into a desperate evasive pattern. Sparks cascaded from overloaded circuits, while Zara clung to a support strut, her inhibitor chip flickering with dangerous orange. Light, can this ship fight? She called over the alarm klaxons. It's a cargo hauler, not a warship. Darren yanked the controls hard to port, barely avoiding a plasma torpedo. But she's got military-grade shields and a few surprises. Through the viewports, Varon Station's bulk provided temporary cover as they dove between its massive habitat. Rings, the pursuing ship's sleek hegemony interceptors, followed like hunting raptors, their crimson hulls gleaming under the station's sodium lights. Tell me about this reclamation course, Darren demanded, targeting the nearest interceptor with his ship's lone particle cannon. Zara's fingers found the inhibitor chip, pressing against it until silver blood trickled down her neck. They collect things the hegemony considers ... useful. Lost technologies, ancient weapons, survivors of dead races. The particle beam lanced out, scorching one interceptor's shields, but failing to penetrate. Return fire hammered their rear deflectors, dropping them to 60%. Survivors of what race? Mine. The word came out strangled, forced past layers of neural suppression. The ... the Luminari. We were the first species to achieve stellar manipulation. We could ignite dead stars, collapse black holes, fold space like paper. Darren's blood went cold. Every schoolchild knew about the Luminari, the mythical star builders, who had supposedly created the galaxy's major hyperspace routes before vanishing without explanation. Most historians considered them folklore. That's impossible. The Luminari disappeared 50,000 years ago. We didn't disappear. Zara's voice was growing stronger, more resonant, as the inhibitor continued to malfunction. We were wiped out by something worse than the hegemony ever dreamed of being. Another torpedo impact sent them spinning. Warning lights indicated hull breaches on 3 decks. They couldn't take much more punishment. There! Zara pointed at a narrow gap between 2 massive cargo containers drifting in the station's outer ring. Cut engines and drift. They'll lose our heat signature. Darren killed the drives, and they coasted into the shadow of a kilometer-long freight hauler. The interceptors shot past, their sensors sweeping the area but finding nothing. Clever girl. He murmured. I remember hiding, she said softly. When the devourers came for my people, we hid in places like this. In the dark between the stars? Devourers? Before she could answer, Colonel Thorne's voice crackled over the calm. Captain Knox, you are postponing the inevitable. The specimen belongs to us. We created what she has become. Zara's inhibitor chip suddenly flared bright orange, then went dark. She convulsed once, then went completely still. When she opened, her eyes again, they weren't luminous anymore. They were miniature stars, burning with nuclear fire. You didn't create me, she said, and her voice carried harmonics that made the ship's hull ring like a bell. You tried to cage the last star-shaper in the galaxy, but some things cannot be contained forever. A revelation, the transformation was gradual but inexorable. Zara's skin began to emit a soft silver radiance, and when she moved, reality seemed to bend slightly around her, like space-time itself was adjusting to accommodate her presence. The inhibitor's completely offline, Darren said, checking his scanner readings with growing alarm. But these energy signatures, they're off the charts. I can feel it all coming back, Zara whispered, flexing her fingers. Where she touched the ship's bulkhead, the metal briefly turned liquid, then solidified into more elegant curves. 50,000 years of suppressed memory, 50,000 years of pain. Through the viewports, the hegemony interceptors had regrouped and were conducting a systematic search pattern. Colonel Thorne's forces clearly weren't giving up. Tell me about the devourers, Darren said, powering up the ship's passive sensors. What wiped out your people? Zara's expression grew distant. Haunted. Machines? Von Neumann constructors gone wrong, built by a species that died out millions of years ago. They consumed everything matter, energy, even the fabric of space itself. They turned entire star systems into gray goo. But your people could manipulate stars. Surely you could fight them? We tried. Her voice carried the weight of eons. We ignited novae to burn them out. We collapsed space to trap them in pocket dimensions. We even tried to flee to other galaxies. She touched the viewport, and for a moment, the transparistile became perfectly clear, showing the cosmic vista beyond. Nothing worked. They adapted to everything we threw at them. Then how did you survive? I didn't. Not really. She turned to face him, and the stellar fire in her eyes flickered with old grief. I was a child when they came from my homeworld, my parents. They found a way to encode my consciousness into quantum foam, hide me in the space between spaces where even the devourers couldn't reach. Darren felt a chill of understanding. The hegemony found you. 50 years ago, one of their deep space excavation teams discovered the stasis matrix on a dead world in the outer rim. They thought they'd found an alien AI. Instead, ... She gestured at herself. They got me, a very confused, very traumatized luminary child, with the power to reshape matter at the subatomic level. The proximity alarms chimed softly. The interceptors were getting closer, so they tried to turn you into a weapon. A controllable weapon. The neural inhibitor was supposed to suppress my memories while leaving my abilities intact. Create a perfect living tool for the hegemony's expansion. Her expression hardened. But luminary consciousness doesn't work like human consciousness. We exist partially outside normal spacetime. Eventually, the suppression would have failed anyway. One of the interceptors was drifting past their hiding spot, active scanners probing the cargo containers. In moments, they'd be discovered. Zara, Darren said quietly, can you get us out of this? She looked at him with those stellar eyes, and for a moment he saw the weight of geological ages pressing down on her young features. Yes, she said, but if I use my abilities on this scale, every power in the galaxy will know what I am within hours. The hegemony will be the least of our problems. What do you mean? Her smile was radiant and terrible. The Devourers never left, Captain Knox. They're still out there, sleeping in the void between galaxies. And they're programmed to respond to luminary energy signatures. The Starshaper's choice. The lead interceptor's searchlight swept across their hiding place, and Darren knew they were out of time. Colonel Thorne's voice crackled through the cum one final time. We have you, Knox. Surrender the specimen or be destroyed. Zara stood in the center of the bridge, silver light cascading from her skin like liquid starlight. I can fold space around us, transport the ship anywhere in the galaxy in the span of a heartbeat. But the energy discharge will be visible from 1,000 light years away. Every sensor array, every deep space monitoring station will detect it. Her luminous eyes met his. The Devourers will know that a luminary still lives. Darren's hands hovered over the weapon controls. His ship's single-particle cannon might damage one interceptor, but 3 against 1 were impossible odds. How long before they arrive? Months, maybe a year if we're lucky. She approached the central console, and where her fingers touched, the metal, it flowed like water, reshaping itself into something more elegant and alien. I can prepare, build defenses, find other survivors, if any still exist. Or I can let them take me. Let the hegemony complete their weapon project. Live as a slave until my mind finally breaks under the neural suppression. Her voice carried notes of infinite sadness. At least then, the Devourers would never. No, the interceptors were closing in, weapons charging. Through the viewports, Darren could see hegemony Marines in the cargo bay of the nearest ship, preparing for boarding action. There's a third option, he said suddenly. Zara tilted her head, alien and curious. We run, but not to another star. System, we go to the one place in the galaxy where even the hegemony fears to follow. He brought up a star chart, highlighting a region of space marked with warning beacons. The periphery, beyond the galactic rim, where space itself breaks down. The stellar graveyards, she whispered, where stars go to die. My people have legends about that region. Ships that vanish without a trace. Entire fleets that sailed into the dark and never returned. He looked at her steadily. But if anyone could survive out there, it would be someone who shapes stars for a living. Zara was quiet for a long moment, considering. Around them, the ship's systems hummed with growing tension as the interceptors moved into attack position. The periphery is where my people made their last stand, she said finally, where the final battles against the Devourers were fought. If there are any Luminari left alive, that's where they would be. Then that's where we go. She smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her, and placed her hands on the ship's central console. Silver fire flowed through the circuits, transforming the wandering star from a simple cargo hauler into something unprecedented, a fusion of human engineering and luminary star-shaping technology. Hold on, Captain Knox, she said, and her voice carried harmonics that made reality itself ring like a struck bell. This is going to be extraordinary. Space folded. The interceptors, Colonel Thorne, Varan Station, everything collapsed into a single point of brilliant light, then exploded outward again as the wandering star emerged in the dark between galaxies. Behind them, the Milky Way spread across the cosmic void like a handful of scattered diamonds. Welcome to the periphery, Zara said, and in the stellar fire of her eyes, Darren saw hope burning bright against the dark. They had escaped the cage. Now the real journey could begin. The end.